welcome everyone to initiating and advancing your strategic GIS governance strategy. We'll go ahead and dive right into introducing our presenters here today. Don, would you like to give a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Don Murray, and I'm one of the founders of Say Software, and yeah, I'm happy to be here this morning with some of our, our best partners and customers. So yeah, over to Theo.
Yeah, so hello everybody. So my name is Theo. I'm working at Consultec as a GIS strategic advisor. And today I'm going to talk about governance concept with FME and also how to assess your FME platform. And I'll be doing that with my colleague, Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I work at Concertec as well with Theo. I direct the professional services team and innovation strategies at Concertec, and I'll be presenting with Theo on our approach to assessing your FME for governance.
Hello, everybody. I'm Francis from District 09. I work there as a GIS application manager. District 09 is the ICT partner of the city of Ghent. And I'm here in the same room with Jelle from Nordend.
Yeah, so I'm Jelle, I'm the founder of Nordend. I've been working with FME since 2006 and I still enjoy it every day. And yeah, we are here to give a presentation on governance on FME Flow.
Fantastic, thanks everyone. All right, and I'll hand it back to Don to give us a brief overview of our agenda here today.
Yeah, so I'll do a quick introduction on data governance and FME, and then we're going to dive right into some success stories because this is really where great insights are shared with both from Nordend and District 9 and our partner Concertec, and then we're going to have some resources. So if you want to learn more. And of course, some discussion Q&A, and then also the contact information from all the presenters will be here if you want to learn more and carry on the discussion. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, and at this point, I'll get our presenters to turn off our webcams just so we can save on some bandwidth for the rest of the webinar here. And before we dive in, I'll give us a quick intro to Livestream if you are newer to the platform. If you have any audio issues throughout, you can click that help button on the bottom left. It has 4 simple troubleshooting steps. Share your emoji reactions with us throughout the webinar. We love to see those. Awesome, I see people already doing that. That's great. We will have a poll coming up shortly, so keep an eye on that polls tab. And then if you do have any questions for our presenters during the webinar at all, please do drop those in the questions tab. And as Don mentioned, we'll have time at the end for some Q&A discussion. And keep letting us know where you're tuning in from with that chat tab. We love to see that as well. All right, and with that, we will dive straight into our poll here. So I will go ahead and launch that in our polls tab, if everyone wants to head on over there. And we'll give everyone a moment to take a look over that. But yeah, today we're wondering, what is the biggest challenge you face in implementing GIS or data governance in your organization? All right, it looks like there's a couple common themes here for folks. Uncertainty about what steps to take and difficulty aligning with organizational goals. Are those kind of common themes that we were expecting here today?
Yeah. And I think, certainly this webinar is going to, really address some of those to really well define the steps that you can take and to get started. Because often with anything new, getting started is the hardest part, right? Knowing what steps to take. So that's really, really great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And with that, I will hand it back to Don for our intro here.
Yeah. So so thanks for that. And I'm just going to go through a quick introduction here. So today we're talking about, the tools, obviously FME platform is the tools we're talking about for efficient deployment of your GIS and data governance strategy. And again, as I talked about earlier, data is the most valuable thing other than the people who work there. to deliver your services. And so having a good data governance strategy is really pays big dividends. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so if anybody's new, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is the tool set that people are using. FME Form is where the data, all the data, moving and connecting and integration and is done, and it's the visual interface. And then for automation, which is key to any organization. I've never been to an organization that doesn't have budget constraints or is short of people. And so with automation, you are able to then have your people focus on higher value propositions. And that's what Flow's about. It's about automating things and, enabling people to get data self-serve rather than having them to ask somebody else for it. And, lots of things like that. So anything about automation. Of course, we have a cloud offering as well called Flow Hosted. And so that's the platform we're going to do today. So with that, I'll hand it off to our good friends at District 9 in Nordend.
Francis and I, we will be talking about how we applied governance on FME Flow at the Municipality of Ghent, and District 9 is the ICT provider for it. And the governance was necessary because previously the different departments of the city could publish processes, FME processes, into production, and that could lead to errors in the database, and then it would have to be solved. And now we have deployment management, where the same people can publish the processes into the acceptance environment or development or staging environment, and then there's a deployment into production, and that's what we will be showing today. So Francis.
So I will present a little bit tell you a little bit more about District 09. District 09 is a strategic ICT partner of the city of Ghent. It was founded in 2003. We manage about 600 applications, serving 50,000 staff and serving about 300,000 inhabitants, students, visitors, and etc. So as you hear, we have a lot of data, and FME helps us a lot with transferring and transforming this data in other systems and bring this data alive. With District 09, we provide IT infrastructure, application development, digital innovation, and e-inclusion. This is for the whole city and its partner organizations.
And then a small world on Nordend. So we do consultancy in BIM and GIS, and we mainly use FME for it. We started in 2019, and 2 years ago we became bronze partner of Safe Software. We also provide data governance services and training in FME and GIS, and we do this to the public services like District 09, as well as the private market. So our agenda of our section of the presentation, we will go through some best practices on FME Flow, on how we use resources, and on how we use the database and web connections, why we use Python parameters, and how we would like to replace them by deployment parameters in the future. And Francis will be talking about roles and rights, and about the project deployment from the staging or acceptance environment to production. The situation here in the city of Ghent is that the different departments, the business, they can develop their own FME processes, and so it's not done by the IT department. We needed some flows on how to deploy these processes made by the business into the IT environment, into the FME Flow environment. And why do we need governance? We need to manage access to repositories. Some departments of the city of Ghent have proprietary data, and the other departments shouldn't see it, for example. So the access management is really important. Also on the resources, and and the database connections, web connections. Not all data should be visible to all people in the city. Previously, sometimes passwords were stored into the workspace, like for a token for an API, for example, and these would be placed into GitHub, and that's also something we want to avoid. And very important in this project was to make the business self-reliant, so they don't have to wait for District 09 to prepare things. So we try to prepare everything in advance. And a big step was also to deploy the processes into production without modifications in the works, without having to be sure that on the production environment we write to the production database and not to the acceptance database, for example. So one of the things we implemented was the resources. One of the first things we noticed was that the shared resource data, we cannot regulate the access to it. So that's a resource that cannot use when shared by different departments. So how did we solve it? We made a parameter, for example, mobility data, and on FME form we connected to a file server with FME data, and then the QA subfolder. QA stands for the staging or the acceptance environment here at District 09, and then mobility. On the server, we create exactly the same folder, maybe even with the same path, and it still contains a subfolder QA. And on production, we create the same resource with the PR subfolder. So when we take a workspace from the acceptance environment into production, we don't need to change anything to be sure that the data will be written to the production file share. Just while we use the mobility data resource, and the name comes back in, well, it starts in FME form and we use it in FME flow. Something similar for SDE connections, but there we need to be sure that the access is done by the Active Directory users. So one department that has only access to its own feature classes and tables. So we created a share also on a file share with a folder shared FME shared resource data. And we fill it in FME form. So we simulate the FME flow environment, and then we have a subfolder SDE connections and the SDE connection itself. So on FME form, while developing, it will be using the Active Directory access, the person who is logged in on the computer, and on FME flow, we have the same name, the same SDE connection, and it will refer to the shared resource data, but that will be local on the FME server. And instead of using an Active Directory user here, we will be using a SQL user of the database. Of the SDE connection itself. And then very similar for the database connection, so where we connect directly to the database. On FME form, we use a parameter, and we use Windows authentication. So the access is also prepared in the GIS environment, and we use this access in FME, and it has a specific name, the GIS edit read connection. The R stands for read, and we have exactly the same connection on FME flow, and there we use the SQL Server authentication with a user of the database itself and a password. So this one has access to all the feature classes and all the tables, whereas the form developer would only have its own access to the database. For web connections, it works a little bit different because there we do not have the option Windows authentication, but we need to define our username and our password. But this is not stored in the workspace. It's stored on the workstation you're working on. So the password is not stored in the workspace itself, and we can use it. This one is the FME server job submitter connection, and we have exactly the same on FME server, but there we use the admin password, so we are sure it has access to all repositories. So the main ID for access to SDE connections, database connections, and web connections is on FME form. We use the Active Directory user, where access is under control anyway. And on FME Flow, we use service accounts that can access everything. And a developer can only add feature classes to which he or she has access to. So you cannot create processes on tables that you cannot access. So this is a safe way of handling it. For passwords, we worked out a different way. For example, we create a Python file with a Python library, in fact, and we put it next to the workspace when we develop locally. And this one is examples.python. For example, it contains 4 parameters. And when using Workbench, we can import this library examples, and we can return each parameter individually, and so we can use it, and we can use different values on the desktop or on the acceptance or on the production server. It all refers to the same Python file, so we are sure that that the right password and the right access is used on the right environment. And this Python file is of course not checked into GitHub because we do not want to share these passwords there. On FME Flow, we put the Python file within the Python folder of the resources, and FME Flow reads this and uses the value of the FME server either on acceptance or on production. And this is just a proof that we can, in the logger, that we can read the password and it has the value that was specified here in the first image. In the future, we want to replace these Python files with deployment parameters for API keys or other passwords, and we also want to replace the database and the web connections, because currently we have one big XML file with all connections for the whole city. There are more than 100 connections, and people can import it, but it's not easy to maintain. And if we can grant the access rights on the deployment parameters, then users can connect to the acceptance environment of FME Flow and get their parameters there, and they will only see the connections to which they have access to. However, we see some improvements that could be done. For example, an API key, which is a text deployment parameter. The value is shown here in the interface. That's something we would like to avoid. And also, normally on the right, you can grant access to groups or users. And this is not possible from within this interface. We need to go to the items interface, and there we can add the right permissions. Another improvement that we would like here is that readers and writers, for the SQL Server reader, for example, the deployment parameters are not present. In a feature reader and a feature writer they are, but yeah, that would require a lot of changes in all the workspaces to be able to change to the deployment parameters. And also here, this value of the API key is visible in FME Flow. It would be nice to be able to hide it and people cannot just see it. So in this project, which took about 9 months to apply, first discussions on what we would like to implement for governance, and then change all the workspaces in 9 months. So we created a workspace to read these 500 workspaces. We looked for specific text of the SDE connections and looked for passwords, and we changed and we migrated all the 500 workspaces to this new deployment method. And now I give the word to Francis.
Thank you, Jelle. Let's talk about security on FME Flow. On FME Flow, as you already noticed, we use Active Directory as an authentication service, and we import groups based on city departments. We work with role-based security, and we created 2 template roles for this project, one for the FME developer and one for the FME user. The FME developer role, they can publish on the staging environment, but they cannot publish to the production environment from FME form. And the user role, template role, is used for testing workspaces. So we use these templates to provide consistent permissions to developer or user Active Directory groups. And this is important for us because we have a lot of Active Directory groups. And in the permissions section, you can easily assign these rights using the load template button. As illustrated in the screenshot, developers enjoy extensive privileges, such as they can create flow automation apps, gallery apps, workspace apps. However, they can't change any configuration of FME Flow or the security. On the other hand, at the production environment, they have only view rights. They can see things. Of course, they can launch their jobs and they can start automation, but they cannot change anything there. This method ensures a control and secure operational environment. So essentially, the FME admin use Active Directory groups to allocate permissions within FME Flow. Thus, he used the Active Directory groups to give permission to repository resources database connection, while the individual departments retain control over the membership of these Active Directory groups. This structure ensures a streamlined administrative process. So to facilitate this process, District 09 developed an external tool built directly on Active Directory. And the data manager of a city department, he can look up users in this tool and he can grant them rights. He can decide to make someone the FME developer or an FME user. He can even choose to make someone administrator of this tool. Any modifications within this tool is synchronized with FME Flow within 5 minutes. Of course, this is our case, 5 minutes. You can change these settings to 1 minute or half an hour. It works really like a charm. During the project, we noticed that permissions on FME Flow were not consistent. We noticed on database and web connection, you can only grant full access or no access. Unlike with automations, you can choose from view, run, or full access. For us, it would be a better option. You could, for example, give read access to database and web connections, so our users can use these connections, but they cannot change them. For schedules, we see the same thing. Only full access is possible, and it's crucial for our users to see when their jobs are running, when the schedules are running. But we don't want them to unintentionally change or delete these schedules. For Flow apps, it's a little bit different. It's like Jelle mentioned for deployment parameters. You cannot share it directly from the interface, but you have to go to the security section. You choose items, you go to your Flow app, and you can share it over there. For the calendar view for FME Flow schedules, we know it's already on the list. We are aware of plans to introduce this. It's important for us because schedules on our FME Flow environment is increasing fast. Also, automation is increasing fast, and we need an overview of these schedules and automations. It's crucial for us to avoid data conflicts, and it's also important to plan maintenance windows. So it's important to know when the schedule is running. But I like to thank here a special thank to Philip Blackburn Gravel from the city of Repentigny for creating a nice workspace that generates this colorful spreadsheet. Then deployment preparation. So the FME developer creates his workspace on FME form. When he's ready with testing, he can publish it to our staging environment. He tests it again, and then he can create the project. The project is packaged as a zip file and undergoes a validation by the deployment manager. The project is restricted from including database and web connections, tokens, user information, or Python files. But a little note here, there has recently been a nice improvement, has been introduced with FME Flow 2023, wherein all essential dependencies are now added automatically. However, you have the capability to exclude these database and web connections during the import process into the target system. Furthermore, the workspaces are checked. They cannot contain any passwords or embedded connections. And finally, the existence of SDE database and web connections are checked if they exist on the production environment because they are needed there to let the workspaces run smoothly. And then finally, the deployment execution. The business creates a ticket. The deployment manager takes charge of this process. He will import the project, which he can choose to override existing or not. He can also choose to have the token disabled on the target system until explicitly enabled. And it really takes only 5 minutes to do this. So the business is very happy with this kind of workflow. So some conclusion here. As already mentioned, split access of Active Directory and service users. So let the business use their Active Directory accounts on FME form for database and web connection, and use service accounts on FME Flow. Empower the business to be self-reliant by enabling them to independently create workspaces or projects. Validate these projects to see if they follow your guidelines, and deploy to production with minimal effort. So the customer can work flexibly under full control of the FME administrator in a safe and secure environment. The next steps: carefully plan and organize your FME Flow setup from the outset to avoid the need for later reorganization. So apply governance from the beginning, and deploy processes by system admin instead of publishing directly to production. I thank you very much.
Great. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I have taken notes on some of the things we can do to make FME Flow even better. There's lots of work going on around the whole notion of data ops and how you move workflows from development to test to staging to production. And so yeah. So thank you so much for that, Francis and Jelle. And so now next we're going to go to ConcertTech.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. So today we're going to talk about getting started with governance, especially today. So we're going to do a brief overview, but we really want to give people an idea of like, how do I take all these type of things that I have to manage my FME platform. And it really ties into the idea of managing my data, because FME is touching data across my organization and different systems across the cloud. So it's really important to have a good, governance around the use of this super powerful tool. So today we're going to start with a brief overview of how we see governance in order to set a framework for how to get going. How do you get started? And to say what Don was saying earlier, the idea is sometimes the step looks daunting at the beginning. Where do I start from? How do I get going? So we're going to try to give everybody kind of an idea or a framework on how they can actually attack that, and how we can get going, and how we can sort of break it down into, a sort of a structure where we can evaluate how we are managing our FME server. And we'll conclude with a little example of, a real life use case, because we like to give, a real perspective on what this looks like when it's in action as well. So who are we at ConcertTech? We're GIS consultants. So ConcertTech's been in business for 34 years. We've been partners with Safe Software for a very long time. We're super happy to work with them. So we are, we've been partners, I think, for 2 decades now. And what we do is we provide sort of full services around, as in the FME space, we provide full services around the use of the FME platform. So everything from, governance exercises and assessment, to coaching and training, and also, working with the licensing and helping people align their business needs to the tool correctly. So this is sort of what we've been doing for a really long time, and it's something that we're very proud that we work on. So I'm going to start at the beginning of the story. So to give this framework for, how the idea of doing governance around FME came about. At ConcertTech, we've been working with FME server, so now FME Flow, since 2008. And at the very beginning, FME was a tool that kind of grew organically in a lot of organizations. So somebody would start to use it, and it's such a great tool that somebody else would start to use it, and then a bunch of people would be using it. And then eventually people would say, oh, we're going to take, the enterprise platform and do some automation around it. And so we would go and, install the tool, and then people would put 1 thing on it and 2 things on it. And then what happens later on is that then there were like 300 things on it happening. And so that led to, some inevitable challenges like a decade later. So the challenges that we saw happen, one that I often like to point out is staff turnover. So it's literally happened several times that I have clients that, the main staff member who was sort of the master of the FME environment left the organization, and there wasn't really a great handoff of information. So, the clients were like, we have to retake control. And that can go even as far as, some, use cases where unfortunately even, passwords were lost and stuff like that. So, staff turnover is a consideration, especially now, considering that, there's a lot of, changing personnel and landscape. So FME has been around longer than, like the staff that might be using it. So that's leads into why governance, permissions and security issues, lots of legacy content. So, maybe workspaces, but, nobody's really in charge of them anymore. We don't really know what they're doing. So there's a number of different challenges that people who were using FME for a long time started to face. And, with some of the newer organizations using FME server, we have, changing deployment options. So what's the best way to deploy FME in my organization? Integrations have grown across as well. It used to be sort of a tool that just the GIS department was using, and now we see more and more use across an organization, across different kinds of systems. And as the IT landscape changes to a mix of cloud and on-premise and SaaS applications. You know, we have a different kind of landscape that we're working with as well now. So the solution, you know, to us was to start to approach, you know, implementing my FME platform with, you know, some governance around it and making actually, you know, an implementation plan and coming up with what were the best practices that considered an organization's needs in the short term and midterm, and sometimes even with an eye on the longer term as well. So it's a living system. We have to think about not just moment of, oh, I installed my FME server, now I'm good to go. I have to think about what's next, or where are things going to go from here. So what we did is structure the governance around 3 main pillars. And that allows us to sort of like assess how FME gets used. So these pillars, we divided them into technology, people, and practices. So the idea of putting these 3 pillars around governance allows us to sort of, you know, evaluate the different kinds of needs. So in technology, we're talking about, you know, how is the FME server or FME Flow now installed? How, you know, what are the security settings? What kind of user management is being used? You know, what size of machines do I need? So all the part that's sort of the IT focus of implementing the platform. And the people aspect is very important because it's people that are using the technology, people that are ultimately benefiting from the data, you know, being accessible in the right place, in the right moment, in the right time. So the people aspect is a mix of, you know, what skills are required for people to work with the technology? How do I integrate somebody new into the team who's going to use the technology? What are the roles and responsibilities? One of the main challenges we often find is that sometimes there's one great person who knows FME Flow very, very well, but perhaps there's no backup to that person. So what are the roles and responsibilities in the organization around the use of the tool? And then the practices aspect is, how do we use the tool? So what is the technology? What is the IT part? What is the people part? And how do we use the tool? So that includes, how do we manage it? How do we make decisions around it? How do we, what kind of standards are there? If I want to put something into production on my FME Flow, what does that mean? What are the steps to do that? And this allows us to have greater predictability. And one of the benefits to being able to do that is to make sure that I'm able to keep my technology up. And by keeping my technology up, I'm able to make sure that I'm you know, getting the best out of it and really able to provide all those great projects that bring value to my organization. So that's sort of the framework in which we can think of governance in order to give ourselves an idea or a structure to start to think about how to use it. But there are a few things that I often like to point out when we're approaching an exercise around how do we manage and implement this platform. So I like to, you know, often remind people that one of the main things that's really important, and I believe that it was just said a few minutes ago by Jelle and Francis, is, you know, the business need drives a lot of the rest. So in all of our practices, in all of our work, we often like to determine, you know, what is the role of the tool? What value is it bringing to the organization? Because that actually helps us make the decisions to provide the tool in the best way possible to bring that value. So I often ask people to ask themselves, what are you going to be doing with the FME server or FME Flow in the next 6 months? Often we have a clear picture of that, but we can often have an idea as well in the next year or 3 years. So by trying to see what the roadmap is, it helps me provision what the needs are as well, because it's going to drive everything from the security requirements. It's going to drive everything from provisioning a tool that's powerful enough to provide the needs. How many engines does my server need? Because I want to be able to, you know, really leverage the power of the tool in its best thinking. And this is why I also like to set the idea of the mindset as well. I like to remind people to kind of avoid a scarcity-based thinking around the tool. When we're really deploying it in the right way, we find that actually the tool brings a lot of value. But if we start to think, oh, I have to work with my one engine forever, sometimes we might be missing opportunities. We might be missing opportunities to bring value in our organization as well. And one of the most important things is to also think about measuring that value. You know, are we saving time in the organization? Are we bringing better quality to the data in the organization? And being able to measure that value really helps us set the framework for how we have to think. And I do like to finish with what governance is not, which is not necessarily a 3,000-page rule book that no one wants to fit. And it's not static in time. So we like to start with something, but we also like to make sure that it's something that can evolve with the needs as the tool gains, brings value in the organization. So, you know, if you have 3 things running on your FME server today, you might not need that 3,000-page rule book. But like later on, as the tool, you know, touches more systems and works with more systems, you want to give yourself the space to rethink some of that work. So I'm going to pass it on to Theo now. So now that we know what governance is, now our goal is going to be to see, where do we get started with this? All right, Theo.
Exactly. Thank you, Leslie. So now that we've introduced the governance concept with FME, we are going to see how to assess your FME platform and how can you use this step as a first step to start your governance journey. So talking about first step, we like to start with a simple question. But I mean simple. You'll realize that maybe this is not really simple. And the question we like to use is, as an organization, where do we stand with FME? So at first look, as I was saying, this question can seem to be easy to answer. But in reality, when you start to think about all the 3 governance pillars, so the technology, the practices, and the people, this simple question can turn into something quite more complex. So that's why we develop a methodology to assess your FME platform, and we'll be talking about this methodology in the next few slides. So here you have the high-level scope of the methodology for the FME assessment, and there is nothing magical here. I mean, this is 4 basic and simple steps that you need to follow, but you need to follow them in a structured way with a logical order. So you need to start with an initial diagnostic, which is one of the most important part of your assessment, because this is the foundation. I mean, this is where you'll be able to diagnostic your ecosystem and to collect a lot of data that you will be able after that to analyze and cross-reference. And once you'll be okay with the analysis stage, you'll be able to set priorities and also define some recommendation. And this will lead you to the definition of a roadmap and also the implementation of your governance inside your organization. So we really want you to use this FME assessment as a first step to start the governance journey. So in the next slide, we'll go have a closer look at all those 4 steps, and we'll start with the initial diagnostic. So the initial diagnostic, what we like to do at Consortec, it's to do it with a sequence of workshop. So it can be workshop or interviews, but they need to all have a specific and dedicated objective. And also, again, a logical order. So that's why you need to start with the global context and then talk about some more technical stuff and finish with the business use of FME. So if we look at the first workshop you'll need to conduct on the global context, this is where you'll need to ask you question about, let's say, the historical implementation of your FME. So you can ask you a question like, what was the first reason for your organization to start using FME, or what was the first project developed with FME, and what was the main roadblock or lesson learned from the past? And all of those questions will help you have a better understanding of your current ecosystem. And you'll also need to think about some other topic, like the user, for instance. So who are my user around FME? And the goal here is not to only focus on the FME administrator or the group of FME author, because it's also important to consider the IT people that manage the security of the server, or even, I mean, the end user that just consume the end result coming from FME. So that can be, let's say, the financial department of your organization. And once you'll be okay with this, you'll need to do the same kind of exercise with the system. What are my connected system that I'm using with FME? And you'll need also to think about the future. So to try talking about the FME vision. So Leslie was mentioning that this is really important for you to have a plan for the next 6 months, or even for the next year or 3 years. So that's where you'll need to ask you a question about, do I plan to use like a new technology in the next a few months, and will I need to have some training for my user because they'll need to be able to manage the new technology. So there'll be all topics for the first workshop, and then you'll be able to jump inside more technical topics. So the second workshop will focus on the FME Flow environment. So that's where you'll need to think about your architecture, your security, your configuration. So let's say you have like a distributed architecture, so it will be a great time for you to just document all of that and to see which kind of database are you using, and which kind of encryption are you using, the default encryption key coming from FME, or do you have a custom one? So that's all topic of discussion for this second workshop. And then you'll be able to deep dive inside the management of the server. So topic like backups, monitoring, maintenance, user permission, that's all topic of discussion for this third one. So let's say we were talking about backup. It would be great to ask you a question about who is in charge of managing the IT backup of the server, or even, do I have a disaster recovery plan in case of any like power outage or those kind of things. And you'll need, again, to collect as much data as you can during those workshops. Then you'll be able to reach the last one. The last one will focus on the business use of FME. And what I really like to do at this stage is to link and analyze and do the diagnostic between the process and the business. So let's say you have 100 workspaces, then it will be great for you to see if they are responding to a specific business need. And that's where you need also to collect information about. So again, I was saying that this is one of the most important parts, because if you do a great diagnostic, then you'll be able to do some great analysis. And here, the main goal for you will be to cross-reference everything and create link between all objects and all information. So you'll really need to put all the parts and pieces together so that you gain some value from the diagnostic. So let's say during the diagnostic, you were planning to, you identify that in the next 6 months, you're using ArcGIS Online to send trigger and webhooks to your FME server. Then probably it will be great for you to identify that you'll need to adjust your architecture, because you'll need to expose your FME server to the internet. And you'll also need to train your user on how to use webhooks and JSON format. So that's all, that's the main goal for this second stage. So once you'll be able to highlight those results, you'll reach the third stage of the assessment, which is the definition of the priorities and also the identification of the recommendation. So basically, this step should be way more easy, because if you did a great job for the two first stage, the only thing you'll need to do here is to identify the priorities that will take into account your organization orientation, your budget, your constraint, and your context in general. So what we like to do at Consortec is, during this step, we like to create a spreadsheet that can be, that can be an Excel spreadsheet or something on SharePoint. That it's never mind. But the really important thing here is that you need to document the current situation, and also having another column for the targeted situation. In between those two columns, you can identify the recommendation or the action to take to bridge the gap between your current state and the target situation. And then it will also be important for you to set the priority. And also, because we want this assessment to be linked with the governance, it will be important for you to have another column that you can use to link an action to one of those 3 governance pillars. So let's say you were planning to adjust your architecture, then it will be great for you to refer that action to the technology pillar. Or if you plan to train your user, then again, just referring that to the people pillar of the governance. So basically, after the 3rd stage, your assessment will be completed, because the next step, the last one, is for defining the roadmap and starting the implementation. But basically, this is no longer part of the FME assessment. As I was saying at the beginning, the FME assessment, the goal of it will be to lead you to this step. And after the 3rd stage, so after setting some priority and recommendation, you'll already have a draft of your roadmap. So the only thing you'll need to do at this stage is to make sure it fits, all of your recommendation and all of your action fits inside your operation, and then you'll be able to start the implementation of your governance. So that's all for the FME assessment part, and I'll pass it back to Leslie so that she can give you a concrete example of an FME assessment.
Yeah, okay, so I thought it would be fun to just give an idea of, okay, we evaluate a situation, we make an assessment and come up with recommendations based on a use case. So the use case I have is a municipality with a population of around 200,000. They'd been using FME for about, a decade. And where their need came in assessing their situation was they wanted to migrate, but they were migrating from a version that the architecture had changed, and they have critical processes running in their FME environment. So this is a use case where they don't have 300 workspaces, but the workspaces that they do have running, the FME work that they are doing is critical. So that's why assessing is very important sometimes, because let's say the number of workspaces is not always an indicator of how mission critical those workspaces might be. And so in this case, that's what we identified as something that was very important. So when we assessed the situation, we had to develop a new architecture, for instance, and they were using a fault-tolerant architecture. They had 3 environments. They had a development, a UAT environment, so a test environment, and a production environment. But only their production environment was in a fault-tolerant environment. And that meant that there was no way to really test out the fault tolerance. Except in real life when it fault tolerated sometimes. So one of the recommendations that we came out with, if you look on the recommendation side, was to actually mimic as closely as possible to production the UAT environment, the testing environment, so that we could actually test what happens if a system went down. Does it fail over correctly? So one of the recommendations was to alter that architecture. We also had, it also allowed us to say, okay, in a migration situation, we're migrating processes that have to run critically and have to be available 24/7. So this allowed us to create a migration plan that allowed us to reduce to the maximum the possible downtime of the system. So by understanding the context, understanding that for business purposes, the system needs to be available and running, we're able to assess what the best method to put that into production is. We also, one of the pros that we identified, because it's not always identifying things that are that need improvement or could benefit from improvement, but it's also taking a look at, hey, what's going well as well. In this case, this group had a fantastic testing process in place. They knew each of the people, let's say, involved in the business processes, so in the data processes, they knew how to test that their part of the workflow was working. So actually, they had a quite efficient way of testing that a system was ready. So actually that was a very good thing. So that means we didn't have to make too many adjustments on how we were going to test for production. It was more going to be the series of events that was going to lead to putting a process into production. We did identify that at the time there was only one FME Flow administrator, and then we did recommend that they start offloading some skills onto at least the second person which they do have a second person now starting to come into helping with that process. So the idea is I just wanted to show a balance between, you know, assessing and then, you know, utilizing that information in order to come up with what the best path for this client is. And because of that, they have a very efficient way of migrating their processes every year. One of the recommendations was to, you know, move away from the use of notifications. In their case, they could really benefit from using automations. In the first go, we decided that it was better to wait. And now in this round, we are looking at actually restructuring towards automations and really taking that next level advantage. So we were able to make that kind of roadmap and that planning because we assessed the situation from the business needs, the technical, the security, and all those facets. So in conclusion, you know, we do want you guys to take away the idea that the business needs drive everything. It's you know, we're hoping that we've given you guys some ideas that, you know, if you take those like 3 facets of like the you know, the technology, the people, and the practices, you can get a pretty good picture of how to get started in you know, in creating a good governance around your tool and really getting that great benefit from it. So what we did today, I wanted to hurry to this slide to leave the QR code up for a second, was we actually made sort of a checklist based on this kind of approach that could help you guys get going if you want to self-assess your FME server. So, you know, you guys can probably grab that little URL in the on the slide, or take a photo of the QR code and see if that can help you guys out. And I hope I've left it up long enough because we're like at 1 minute. So we just want to thank you. Here's me and Theo's contact info if you guys are interested in you know, if you have any questions or want to learn more. It's been a pleasure, and it's really something that we enjoy working on.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Leslie and Theo and Jelle and Francis. That's been great. Really, really great content. And I'll just whip through some slides now. And so, yeah, so some of the resources we have, a little bit about Safe Software. Yep, we've been around a while. Okay. So there's a knowledge base for questions. You can find out, you know, lots of how-to things. There's webinars coming up. We had one a couple of weeks ago on DevOps. So if you want to learn more about that, the deployment parameters that were mentioned and things like that, check that out. They're all on demand. There's an ebook for folks who are thinking about spatial data and FME at the enterprise level, the IT level. And of course, our academy is a great way to just brand new relaunched. And so a great way to learn about FME. We've tried to break it up into bite-sized modules so you can do it at your own pace and what's important to you. And of course, yeah, reach out to us or to any of the presenters. If you want to learn FME in 90 minutes, then the academy.safe.com, we have this thing called the Accelerator. And it's a really great way to get a good overview in 90 minutes about FME. And yeah, your community badge, don't forget about that. If you're in the community and you're collecting badges, today's code is GFMAL, and join the community, a really great group. You know, everybody on here today is in the community, and it's a great way just to have, you know, discussions about everything data and all the data challenges that everybody tackles with. And then we don't have time for questions, but here's a very important slide. Again, all the contact information for today's presenters. If you want to reach out to us, it's info@safe.com. And I know I speak for everybody when I say we really love to talk about, you know, data and data challenges and how everybody can get more value from their data. The recording will be sent out to everybody who registered. And so feel free to watch it, share it, play it, whatever you want to do with it. And again, I took notes during both of the speakers on how we can improve FME Flow and FME Form. We don't for an instant think that the product is complete. It's like anything in life, it's a journey. not a destination. And we just love the feedback from everybody. So thank you so much to all our presenters. Really appreciate your time. They're amazing partners. And thank you so much to everybody who tuned in today. Really, really appreciate it. So with that, I think we're done, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.